Hey, what's up, y'all? This is your girl Diamond. So y'all know that I want to highlight people. If I find somebody that is like doing a damn thing and I feel like they align with shit that I be talking about, I break my neck to try to get them on the show. And this person is no different. I want to introduce y'all to Dr. Shanea Thomas. She is a Black queer non-binary person, and I made that correction because in some of the language that when you are talking about yourself, I say call me, you say call me he, call me she, but don't call me they, and so that's going to be where we gonna fucking start in this
Okay.
right now. So tell me why he and she is cool, but they is not. So let's break that down.
Well, hello everybody. It's great to be here. First of all, a fan. Like this is like I had to tell somebody earlier. I was like, I'm about to be on a celebrity podcast. Like I am a complete fan. So first of all, um, why don't I use they? So for me, they feels I don't necessarily get dysphoric very often, but I do feel like they feels like more than one person to me. And that doesn't mean that it means that way for other people, right? So I also have to be careful where people are just like, well, it doesn't mean that way for me. For me, that's the way it feels. And I also gender's gender's a construct, right? Like I don't necessarily move on this planet based I don't want to move on this planet based on the implications or the standards that white supremacy has us, right? And a part of that for me means identifying as one gender, a particular gender, having particular understanding around gender. I literally move this planet as Shania. And so I like to hold that as just seeing myself as one person, one being, one spirit. But for they just doesn't resonate with me. And I will also say, like, I back in the day before, we started talking about like non-binary, particularly as a term, like I identified as bisexual, but I only had that term because that's all I had. We talked a little bit before about like where we got ideas of gender. For me, my parents are Black and Southern and straight, right, in the church. So there wasn't necessarily a they at all. It was only a he or a she. That's just how you were seen. And so I think that giving options, I think giving options kind of kicks the system a little bit, but also like having to use something that almost to me feels like is erasing both parts, all parts of myself doesn't feel natural either. And again, that doesn't mean for everybody, but they to me just doesn't feel great. And so that's why I also give the option of, well, if you don't want to call me he or she, doctor is also available as well. So yeah, that's where I start. Complicated, but simple for me, right? But very complicated for other
It's
people.
simple for me too. I feel like it makes total sense. And for me, I think what's even more dope is what you just said. Like the doctor, first of all, that motherfucker's expensive, but also that honorific, the history, a little history tidbit. I remember reading Jane Crow, and it was talking about it was Polly Murray's story, and Polly Murray said, look, I was uncomfortable with motherfuckers calling me she. I was kind of uncomfortable with motherfuckers calling me he, even though I wanted them to kind of do that was more the direction I wanted to go. But if you're uncomfortable with calling me he, I don't want you to call me she. Motherfucker, call me doctor, because that's what I earned that motherfucker. And I know that when you call me doctor, you gonna masculinize it anyway because of misogyny. So let me wear you out by forcing you to do that.
Thank you, and I'll take it. And I have one of my really dear mentors who's also a Black queer non-binary person. We also talk about, and some of that also depends on who's calling me that, right? Where it's just like I don't necessarily like girl from everybody, but we could be in this space and call each other girl. If I'm talking to my friends who I like share girlhood with, like I don't mind them calling me girl. My mom still calls me her daughter. Like there's still parts of myself that especially as a queer, especially as a Black girl who was raised as a Black girl, I appreciate that. So I also think that some of this is also racialized. Like who calls me what is really dependent. I don't want white people calling me girl. I don't like that. Doesn't feel good to me. But when Black people call me a certain thing, it also feels like home. I said this in a conference not too long ago. I think sometimes also when we talk about pronouns, we completely remove this idea around spirit. We think about it as something you do in academia or something you do at the workplace or something you're just doing for people at the grocery store. But I feel like sometimes when I hear people call me certain things, I want you to call it because your spirit is reflecting something that you see in me. And so when people call me she or girl, like I'm hoping that comes from a place where you don't necessarily see me as a woman, but you see me as a certain type of spirit. When you call me here, doctor, that comes from a certain place. So I also want to add in like the humanistic part of some gender where it's just like, I'm also talking to you and you inside and trying to reflect and validate some of those parts of yourself. And I feel like sometimes we have just taken this as a work skill and not a life skill, as I like to say. So just also want to add that too.
And then there's like the basics of communication piece. I feel like the basics of communication is to convey an idea. And so how when I'm speaking to you is reflecting our shared idea of each other. Like what is the idea that you want me to have in the language? What is the idea that I want you to have in the language? And how are we negotiating that? And it feels like you said it feels like home, feels safe. It feels like we are not in a battle. Because if like say I'm a bigot or a transphobe, I am coming to you not respecting you because we're on a battlefield in the language arena. And so I am doing whatever I can to shield myself from what they are calling the gender ideology or what they're calling I'm shield myself from whatever you're trying to get me to respect and see in you. And so
Yeah.
I'm gonna force what I think your pronouns should be. There is a battle happening. But if I
Right.
care for you as a community member, as somebody that I see your humanity and I see who you are as a person, and or I want to communicate with you with care, then I'm coming to you with language, with a communication, whatever that may be, that is letting you know that I see your spirit. I see who you are as in spirit and your physicality. And I want that to be something that doesn't make you feel like I'm trying to attack you. It make you feel like I want to communicate with you with care.
Absolutely. And yes, I'm so excited we started here. And battle, having a conflict, saying something wrong, misunderstanding is not a battle, right? Like
No.
part of me being in community with you. So there's sometimes I meet people and they misgender me unintentionally and I correct them. And then for them, sometimes it turns into, oh my gosh, I am so sorry. Well, I watch Pose and I love trans people. You know, it just starts to get into that. And it's like, no, like I'm correcting you because I want to be in community with you. Battle starts happening when you push back and you say that I'm not that person. Well, you were a girl then, or you were this then. What do you mean? What is this about non-binary? What? That's the battle. But community and that is not me pushing or correcting you means that I want to be in community with you. I just don't want you to continue to step and be incorrect when you are acknowledging me. So
Right.
yes, yes.
How did you come to terms with your identity in this way, in the way that you have? Because we're all working through it and going to continue to work through it. But right now in your life, what has that process been like in your life? And start even as early on as possible.
Yeah. It's hard. I'm still going through it. I feel like I can remember, and I'll describe it as queerness because of adulthood, but then of course I didn't have this language, right? But I remember being queer around the age of 6. I just remember that, boys were there. Like I remember the pressure of like having a boyfriend. My grandma is also very Southern. God rest her soul. She's from North Carolina. She was always like, when you having a boyfriend, I'll help you find a boyfriend. I was not interested, but I like being in sports. I didn't wasn't really a dress wearer. I was always in the street getting dirty. I was either in the street getting dirty or in my room reading Babysitter's Club books. So both and I don't think I really gave myself permission to think about what queerness was like until college. Still had a boyfriend, but I think now that I understand that me having these boyfriends didn't mean I was straight. I think I just like having a boyfriend. Like that's pretty much it. So early college, that's when I started to think more about like, what does it mean to like girls? Like, what does that mean? I definitely had a boyfriend all through college, but I think I started to accept myself, especially around the way that I dressed, that I was just more masculine than everybody else. It wasn't until I got to college, and I remember before I left, I went to Virginia Tech for undergrad, got my degree in psychology, and I was thinking about what my next steps were. I didn't want to be behind a desk and give medicine to folks, so I didn't want to be a psychiatrist. But I did eventually visit. We always, for family trips, went to Baltimore and DC to visit. So I went to the Blacks and Wax Museum, and that's where I was just like, oh, like these are my people. Like this is history. Like my mom always gave me Black history books, but to see like the museum in the city and DC in itself, I was like, I want to come here. Like this is where I need to be. And around that time where I was doing applications to go to Howard University for my master's in social work, there was this one clip, and I'll send it to you, but there's this one video it's about HIV, but it's really about like queerness and community. And this is where I started to see people who look like me. It played on BET. It was an hour. It's like an hour special. Somebody, funded it or whatever. So I'm sitting there in my room in Blacksburg, Virginia, and I'm like, who are these people? Like, where is them? Like, where can I find these folks? So I eventually go to DC, go to Howard, and that's where I started going to. We call it. They had the Black Lesbian Support Group. And I found friends that I'm still with today. 20 years later, these are folks who brought me into not only talking about Blackness and queerness, but also talking about like HIV. Like, in a lot of these spaces, especially in funding spaces, those are one and the same, right? Like those are just one and the same group. So a lot of my friends, and that's how I got into HIV work. So I think for me, it was always like, it was a little bit of like, I just put myself around folks. These folks feel comfortable. There was a spirit about them that I really liked. They just, yeah, it made me feel like home in a way. MySpace is where I first found my first girlfriend, who lived in Baltimore at the time. So, my first partner, that person helped me, like, took me to Philly. We went to Giovanni's room to go to the bookstore. That's where I got my first Bell Hooks books. That's where I was introduced to kink and polyamory. That kind of got my ears going. I have a really good friend who also does, used to teach kink classes. So I would go and like learn how to spank and impact play. And it was just, I just found myself going to places. Like I just found myself being around people who looked like me. And those folks ended up being queer or trans or otherwise at the time, or they were a part of the HIV movement. I do remember, and I tell this story where I remember being in elementary school in James Baldwin Giovanni's room. I was in the fourth grade. I don't know if the school knew what that book was about, but I ended up picking it up and taking it home and reading it in the fourth grade, clearly remembering and just being like, two men? What do you mean? But never being like ill gross, but always being interested. Like I'm curious about like who these people are. And so that's how I found James Baldwin in the fourth grade, elementary school. So fast forward today, it really has just been me planting myself in places, and also me realizing that sexuality and gender are two different things, right? So I think who I partnered with and then who I was to those partners and who I was to the world were also evolving in a way. So I did move from like being bisexual to being queer. I think even historically being queer feels better to me. I align with queer stories and queer spaces a little bit better. Those, of course, really changed when I had a baby, when I got pregnant or decided to wanted to be pregnant. And that was probably a tough time for me because I felt like at that time I was solidified in my queerness and around my gender, around being like a masculine, a center person. I do feel like once I became pregnant, those things were taken away from me. You have to go to the women's clinic. Right. I have to go to the midwives and talk to them about my genitals all the time. I have to correct them about my pronouns a lot. When I'm giving birth, I have to tell them, please do not tell me my child's gender. Like there's a lot of pieces where I had to negotiate around that. And I will also say it's not because I wanted to deny parts of my non-binariness, but some of it was due to safety, right? Like if we look at the statistics around particularly Black women or folks who are having babies and how often they are dying or getting hurt, like how much of a conversation do I have with you about pronouns, and can we just get to around my health? Right? Like let's focus on the important thing. I could put some of my parts to the side. At the time my partner is a trans masculine person, doing the whole negotiation with my, with the doctors. I would rather talk about health and safety as opposed to just making sure that my pronouns are correct on my record. So when you're walking down the street, everybody calls you a woman. When you're pregnant, I was always asked, did I want to know the child's sex? My family was, oh my goodness. They were just like, well, how are we going to have a baby shower? We don't know what the sex is. I'm like, well, babies can wear more than just pink and blue. Like we can do a little bit more than that, right? So my baby shower was all superheroes, all superhero themed. So I think it's still in flux. I I go to my child's school like this. I go to work like this. Like I am a very like masculine and center person. I like to say that I'm femme-assumed. But anytime that I go into my child's school, they will man me and they'll woman me. But it is now I find gender as now I find gender political because I have to negotiate safety, not only just for me, but for my child. I think I would be a harder ass around how I identify if I didn't have another person that I have to take care of. But there are some spaces where I don't always feel comfortable being as out. But there are also spaces where I'm very adamant about like mother is a gender to me. Because I've not only mothered this one beautiful child that I birthed, but I'm mothering a community. Like I mother through my work. Like I take care of mentees. I take care of my family, my friends. So yeah, to long story short, as you say, like, where am I? I think now non-binary feels okay to me for right now. I call myself like a masculine center non-binary person, but some of that does get snatched away from me because they see that I have a child and they see that I have given birth. Those two things sometimes throw people off. But my kid calls me mama.
It was hard for me to accept that from people, and it was like for me to definitely for me to give it to myself, but also like people who looked at me as a mother figure because I took them in when their parents kicked them out, or I took them or I just have been a part of their support system. It was hard for me to accept that, but I think my connection with the people that do consider me their mother, them forcing it, made me kind of accept it. They were like, I don't have nobody else. Like, I lost my gay son in 2022, and in in that relationship, he was very, very adamant about, you are my mother. Like you are, yes, I know who my biological mother is, but because of the tension between us around my sexuality and her being a bigot and her even being a white woman, because he was biracial, her being a white woman and having these kind of flashes of racistness in her that come from her family and all this kind of stuff, you have stepped up in my life in a way that makes me feel like I finally have a mother figure that I can connect to, even though I know this is my biological mother, because we always disconnect because I was her black child. And so with you, it just feels like, oh my God, this feels like what I imagine or romanticize mother feels like, because you
Yeah.
care. You are affectionate to me. You care about me outside of money. You care about me. You get what I'm saying about what I can do for you. You care about me like I imagine a mother should. And so he almost like forced that label on me, and I had to like settle. Is something that I had to settle in because I guess there was some kind of turfiness in me that was like, oh, you not no mother. You ain't birthed nothing. Da 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 da. It felt something like I had to adjust.
Yeah. Okay, so I have a question for you. So, how do you feel about the whole conversation? Because what you said in the beginning was like that was something you were rejecting. So, how do you feel about the whole conversation about people being called auntie? Like, is that like, are you okay with people calling you auntie? Do you feel like you have to be a certain age to be? Because my opinion is is that people don't call me that, but I feel like when I back in my day, that was earned, right? Like I don't necessarily even yes ma'am, no ma'am sometimes slips out for me when I find somebody that I like respect. It gives me a little bit of just like, I had to say yes ma'am, no sir when I was younger. So there's like a respect thing that kind of still lies in me, but it seems like, okay, I hit 35, everybody be auntie. And some people are rejecting that because I feel like that's a title they don't resonate with. But I'm curious to find out, like, do people call you that? And when they do, are you okay or not okay with people calling you auntie?
People do call me that. Normally, cis het people.
Huh.
Like if they don't like it, I rarely am called auntie by other queer people. It
Mm-hmm.
happens, but it's normally men that don't know I'm trans. They'll
Mm-hmm.
they'll call me auntie um as a nice honorific that they're just saying this to this woman. Yeah, auntie, you looking good, auntie. Da, 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 just because I am not their mother and I'm not their sister, but I'm somebody in community with them, they will call me auntie. Um Auntie is something that I like. I am literally an auntie. I also find auntie to be endearing, but I also feel like I don't know, it feels kind of corny sometimes when people make a big deal about it. Sometimes like not I don't feel like anybody, if you don't resonate, you can say I don't resonate, don't call me that. I think anybody has a right to do that because I also feel it would be hypocritical for me not to respect that. But sometimes when I hear people's reasoning, it feels kind of fucking corny. Let's say Oprah. Oprah is notorious for talking about how she doesn't want to be called auntie. Cool. Um, but but then you and Gail, because you was like something about like it was disrespectful or whatever. But
Right, right,
you and Gail have a show that y'all named OGs, and OG is original gangster. Like that is what the fuck the name is. We OGs, and you accept that, but you won't accept Auntie. It feels kind of weird and disconnected, and like eh, it just feel kind of weird, like like you're not connected to culture in that way.
right.
But there's some explanations that makes it feel that I hear people saying they was like, "Oh, I'm not that old." Like you calling me auntie, and I'm not that old. It feels kind of like it's aging me before I need to be aged, or you shading me because you in your 20s and I'm 35, and you're calling me auntie because I'm out of touch. All right, auntie. Like I can kind of see how that can be weird and
Mm-hmm.
disrespectful.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I don't have an issue with Auntie.
Gotcha. Curious. Thank you. Yeah, those two. It's just like, yes, I understand from people from that perspective. When Oprah says, like, Oprah of all people don't want to be, okay, all right, that's fine, I guess.
It's like, oh, okay. The best way to support is to engage with the content. Like, comment, share, and subscribe. Okay, so tell me about where you're from specifically. I know you went, I think I listened to an interview and you was like, I'm just a girl from that went to track star, went to Bethel High School. And where where are you from specifically, and who was like loving on you growing up? Describe like your family unit and all of that kind of stuff.
Oh, goodness. Yes. I am originally from Hampton, Virginia. I got there, by the way, Wichita Falls, Texas. So I'm a military brat. So I started off in Texas. We moved there from to Kansas, Wichita, Kansas, where my brother was born. So we're a family of four. My mom and my dad, by the grace of God, are still alive. I have a younger brother that's 3 years younger than me. I think maybe we moved to Illinois for like half a second before we settled in Hampton, Virginia. So my parents still, the house we moved into, my parents still live there. I was really loved around community and by family. So my dad's family is originally from Georgia and Florida. I have folks in Tallahassee that I just met this summer, which was really awesome to go see them and see my grandma's old home. So, at one point, my grandfather, so both of my parents are kids of seven. They're both middle kids. So my dad's dad eventually was like, we need to move north, doing the whole migration. So a lot of them ended up in Delaware. So they're still in Dover, Delaware right now, Chester, Pennsylvania. And then my mom's family is from North Carolina. They're still there. Most of them are still there. My mom and my dad are actually the only two that left home. So they traveled the world together. My dad was in the military. He went to Vietnam and they ended up settling in Hampton once we finally got older. I think then what I remember is the choice was he either needed to retire or we were going to move overseas. And I think we were settled enough to where he just wanted to stay. A lot of my family are friends. Across the street, Miss Iris, who my friend Monique lived across the street. She was like my second mom. She passed away about 2 years ago. I lived across the street from one of the people that babysat us. The people next door babysat us as well. We were also the home of snacks. So I'm a tourist. And so I'm a tourist. So everybody would come to our house and my parents always bought extra snacks because all the kids came to our house. So we would always have a birthday party. My brother had a basketball court that we would drag from the backyard and all the kids would play in the backyard. So we stayed, I mean, up until I moved out, like there were always people at my house, friends were my family, my parents were always taking in kids, who's coming over to stay. We were just, I was just very, am still very loved on. So I go home probably twice a year at this point. My parents mostly come up here because I had the only grandchild, so they come up and they see Zaya. Zaya's 6 now, born in DC. We love PG. We're settled in PG County, so we're in Temple Hills. And we moved here more out of need. I was at the time partnered. And so we were like, I need more spaces than this 1 bedroom apartment. And we ended up settling here. I'm in an older Black neighborhood. My neighbors next door, one passed actually this year. They've been here for 50 years. Across the street, Mr. Boone has been there for 45 years. He plays organ in the church and cooks pound cakes and sends them to us. We walk the neighborhood and everybody asks about Zay. So I have just been very privileged to live a life to where every step of the way, community has uplifted us, whether they have been blood or not. My village are my friends. It's been really beautiful to see that even though some of my closest friends are like Black, gay, and queer men, they come over and they babysit Zay or they take care of Zay. So that's always been really nice. My baby shower was brought in Erica Woodland, who's a fantastic like trans spiritualist and healing justice activist and social worker, did my baby shower. So like help bring the baby in. It's just been really nice. And in return, I take care of people too. Like, I always invite people to come to my home. Let me cook for you. Let me take care of you. Now you do have to leave. Okay, now you do. Yeah, you have to go after a while, but I like my space. I like my space. But I do invite people to come, and we just share community together. Especially for folks who don't have kids and probably ain't never gonna have kids. I'm like, there's a whole 6-year-old who is willing to show you their fire truck collection. So please come. But yeah, even in I think I said earlier, I'm poly and I'm kinky, so I have one lover and I have one sub that I'm in communication with. But we also have separate families and lives too, so it gives a little space. But yeah, that's me. I'm in Temple Hills, Maryland, by the way of Hampton, Virginia. I'm always going to be a 757 girl. It's just That's just who I am. I know people say like after 20 years, you can say that you're, I've seen other DC people say like, oh, you've been here 20 years. This year is my 20th year. And so people are like, oh, well, you're from DC. And I'm like, no, 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 no. And not because I don't now, let me correct myself, because it's not that I don't like DC, right? It's not that, but DC is its own culture. Like they have their own people, which is why I settled here. So yes, I love my DC people. We cousins, but I'm a 757 girl all the way. So when people say where you from, I say Tidewater. Absolutely.
I love that. I love that. And it reminds me, what was this book? I'm reading this book. I'm done now, but I was reading this book called The Way We Never Were.
Mm.
And it is a book about just it kind of uncovers like different myths about just some things, like just the traditional. Well, you know how people are like, oh, I wish like we can go back to our traditions. And there's a particular traditional narrative that was never really real, particularly for a lot of people. Like when we think about like the mother, the husband, the wife, and the dog, and the kids, and the white picket fence. There are so many different combinations that were really, really common that weren't that and particularly in Black communities, especially around like the turn of the century in the 1900s, like in the early 1900s, when we got out of slavery, there was so many combinations where it was a lot of mother and father, but there always was like an extra family community, an extra person in the house, like, and it's not necessarily a blood relative. There could be just a vagrant that settled with, for whatever reason, they had a skill that worked with this family, and now you got an Uncle Tom that is in the house that I don't know why I picked that name, but I just randomly I put
Sorry,
straight up here.
but yeah, that's right.
But let's just say Tom. We got an Uncle Tom, and he is in the house, and he, he fixed all the stuff, and this is my uncle, and so there always has been this connection of multiple people boarding in your house, especially if you were somebody that was blessed to hustle up and have a big ass house. Oh, we got a room that da da da. When we think about like soul food, how Big Mama was taking care of the uncle, and all that kind of stuff, that was really, really, really common. And so it makes me think about, we have always done in our community that kind of that village, and it kind of, when we think about the old proverb, like it takes a village, like that has always been a common thing and we have adopted it even through the disconnect that happened so long ago, that we have still adopted those things where this is a village thing, and it works for us, as opposed to the master quote narrative, the larger main narrative being that we are an island of, the man is the leader. I have my wife and we have our children and we're protecting our domain. We don't know anybody else. That is not common for us. We really had that kind of village.
Yeah. And I have to, there were parts of me that also had to explore for myself and be a little creative because, again, bless my parents, but they are straight. They are straight and cis through and through. And so when I sit there and I sit them down, I'm like, yeah, I'm ready to have children. And they're like, okay, well, you ain't got no man. So what's happening? I'm like, the internet will take care of that, right? Like it was just, my baby's a donor baby. So it's just like, well, the sperm is secondary to this process, right? I just need for you all to be on board. I was in the midst of my PhD program at the time. I was just like, we just need to figure this out. But a baby is coming. I just need to do some planning and have some help. And even, like I said, at the time with my partner at the time who was trans masculine, there were just some things that I needed to break down in terms of a household structure. Like there is no man and no woman here, right? So how are we going to do household duties? What does childcare look like? All of that stuff was really, for me, when I talk about being non-binary, it's literally a move away from the binary systems of gender. So that's deconstructing everything. How do we do childcare? How are we raising children? How are we running a household? And I will say it's very hard to find people who are willing to do that because we are so used to the systems that we are in that exploring or figuring out what's different, it's hard. And so it has been helpful, particularly now that me and Zay are on this journey alone. We're not alone, right? We're in this house. So I'm the only one paying the bills here. Zay is not contributing, but to add more toys to the pile. But Zay's doing what Zay has to do. But I feel like as a person who's just thinking, I'm giving my child a better opportunity to think about like, yeah, families are not just mommies and daddies. Like families are also Uncle Will's and Aunt Robin's and Aunt, and Uncle Erica's and and Uncle Josh's. Like we are so much more than just having two parent homes. Like everybody can be a part in wanting to play with you and take care of you and love you. So yeah, it's and we're moving also into a generation of just like there are a lot of people who ain't having kids. All right. So I always like to say, like, if we're talking about queer futures, how are we going to move on to the next step and who are we leaving legacy to? And that's not to encourage people to have kids, but that's to encourage to think about like all this work and sweat equity and everything that we are doing to commit to our communities. Who are we leaving these things to in order to continue them for the next generation? So
the best way to support is to engage with the content. Like, comment, share, and subscribe.
So I'm going to switch up to a DEI conversation.
oh,
Because I heard you talking about it, particularly in your TED Talk, and then other conversations I heard you talking about. And so the term DEI is becoming like a modern euphemism for, I feel like, nigga. I feel like it's becoming, they really mean black.
right.
And so, it describe, they're using it as a term to describe black people who are assumed to be inferior and therefore unqualified for equal dignity or equal opportunity and blah, 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 blah. And so it undermines, it goes back to the old, superiority trope that white supremacy kind of put in motherfuckers' heads.
Yeah.
So you talk about feeling bad and in the necessity of feeling bad. That's how I took it. The necessity of feeling bad when it comes to the discomfort of DEI and the discomfort of actually being inclusive, the discomfort of if you really trying to be diverse, you really trying to be equitable, and you really trying to be inclusive, there is going to be an innate discomfort that happen when you are trying to create a table for people, bring people to the table, not just in quantity, but in quality. And so for me, I want to ask you, what is your mindset around that? What is your mindset around what is currently happening in, the context of the Fearless Fund being that shit happening? What is your current mindset about it?
Sure. And I'll talk about this in a way that you'll hear me say like Dr. Thomas Shanea, because I also have to abide by what's happening at my job. So I am the executive director of accreditation at the Council for Social Work Education. I mentioned that to say part of our standards in social work. So my job is in order to make sure that schools are running and are accredited, I run the team that helps do so and I sign the paperwork. So I bring that up to say that within our standards at the Council for Social Work Education, we do add what we call ADEI, which is anti-racist, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Throughout our standards, throughout the process of accrediting folks, we talk about what does DEI look like in education? What does it look like in your curriculum? What are the standards that we are setting for people coming into the program? So there has to be something to make sure that what we call there's a minimum compliance. You got to at least meet the minimum, right? You got to at least make sure that these things are included in you educating other social work students. Shanea, who does community work, HIV work, all the other things, I have such a hard time out here trying it because people immediately go to race. First of all, we have just colored DEI as something racial, as you said, right? So it's immediately coding it as Black. I was in something this past weekend and somebody called it anti-woke. And I was just like, can we also not use that? Because woke was actually a cultural term that Black folks use for a whole other different reason. It wasn't a bad thing. You all turned it into a bad thing, right? So some of the DEI things that I am seeing is trying to appease white feelings to feel more comfortable in doing work that we all should be doing. So I need to make you feel comfortable around making sure that you're, the guy last night was talking about carving watermelons at the Halloween party, the Trump rally. Those aren't appropriate for you to say, well, what happens? Why I want to mention watermelons in this context? I'm not trying to appease you around this, Sally. Like that's not what this conversation is about. But you do need to be uncomfortable with the fact that I'm calling you out on the fact that you shouldn't be doing that. And I feel like that's the piece of DEI that we're missing. If we want to talk about how to be more inclusive, sure. But what I am finding is that people are totally rejecting this idea that being inclusive has to feel good to everybody. It's not. It's literally changing a system or a dynamic and taking a little bit of power away from you folks who are used to having a certain level of power away. And that's not going to feel good, right? It's I don't know if you're familiar with the work of disability justice activist Mia Mingus, but she has this whole conversation around apologies and doing harm. And one thing that she says is that sometimes we think that when people apologize to us, that the harm gets erased and that it feels like it never happened. And that's not how that goes, right? When we apologize or when harm happens, our dynamic has changed. The way that we relate to each other has changed. It might be little and it might be a small shift, but it does change. And some of that healing that has to do is I have to feel uncomfortable about how I made you feel, right? You have to be able to be willing to accept that I'm willing to change or shift my dynamic so we have something that's equitable. So when I talk about DEI to folks, sure, I talk to them about race, and I'm a sexual health educator. So I also kind of come from the angle of talking about sex and gender, but I really do ask people, when you mess up, I need for you to sit in it, because if you just roll over that bad feeling and just try to correct the pronoun you misgendered somebody, or you go ahead and slap an all gender bathroom on a woman's bathroom, like that doesn't fix it, right? You've just temporarily done something to appease your feelings, but you're not changing a system. And that's what Shanea's about. Shanea's about like, what is the way that we can change the system? I do feel like as Dr. Thomas in this particular position, it's helpful to give them some guidance, but folks are still not doing it perfect there either, right? It's always, I feel like everybody has an idea of what it is, but nobody wants to be uncomfortable around it. Hopefully that made sense. But I feel like now we're just talking about how to add more Black people into spaces and not talking about what the effects are of that.
And it's easy because we have to have PhDs in racism in this fucking country as Black people.
Isn't that wild? I need a certificate to tell you about racism. Like, I'm not qualified. I am not qualified today to talk about racism because I don't have a PhD or a certificate that I paid Harvard for. It's interesting.
Crazy.
Times.
So I think when we think about the nuances of what we also are talking about in diversity and inclusion, and getting race is important. Absolutely. It's a part of everything. But us as a community also has to think about that shit outside of those things. How, when we're talking about bringing people to the table and creating a table that's ready for being diverse, ready for being inclusive, ready for being, equitable, we also have to think about those other ideas of diversity that are outside of race, outside of gender. When we think about like disability justice, when we're thinking about transness, when we're thinking about immigrants, and when we're thinking about all these things,
classism.
Yeah. How are you, how are you shifting inner community? It's easier for us to look at white folks and say, or look at men and say, point the finger, da 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 da. But in your community, how are you two also being inclusive when it comes to
Yeah.
colorism, when it comes to like how when I one of the things I was telling my co-host recently, um I was like, let me go through my list of guests and how who has been on my show that I have given a platform, given access to in regards to disability, in regards to colorists. How does my list of people that I have chose to be on here, how does it reflect my politics around classism, around disability, around colorism, around race, around gender? Da, 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 da. How, yes, I am very, very specific on the type of people that I want to do, but how am I actually showing up? Is my politics showing up in that, in who I choose to showcase and da 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 da.
Yeah.
And I think that's important for us to do. I think it's important for whatever work that you're doing. If you are providing housing or you're doing bail programs, how is those politics showing up? Are you actually
Mhm.
looking for people who are disabled who might be in that same situation? Or are you just actually looking for just trans people? Or
Yeah.
you're a Black woman and you are a reproductive justice warrior, and you're out here doing that. Are you actually looking for trans men who might have these same reproductive concerns? Are you actually, or are you just sticking to the Black women because you're only focused on the racialized maternity rate, not understanding that these Black trans men might have the same issues going into Planned Parenthood, going into da 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 da? Are you actually being inclusive while you're
Because everybody, right? Like it's because I'm also I'm afraid to say this because I'm also just like just because you're Black doesn't mean that you're a DEI specialist, right? Like there is still again, DEI is not just race. So if you're not talking about indigeneity, classism, where people live, access, privilege, if you're not talking about all those things, you're actually not being inclusive. So yeah, we all have some work to do. Right? We all have some work to do, but I see that too, where it's just like, again, it's not just about adding Black people to a space because we also have some things in our community and culture that we also need to be a little bit more diverse on. So I agree.
And then I love how you use in one of your talks, you use this analogy about Kim Kardashian and how, which was a ridiculous moment, but, and it was and the why was a perfect analogy is because, we demonize Kim K for various reasons, just and
Right.
unjust, da 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 da. But it was easy for us to look at that moment and say, bitch, you are losing your diamonds in the ocean in where for everybody who's listening, if you don't know, there is a moment on kicking it with a Kardashian. I don't
Keep
remember.
it in. Mm-hmm.
Kicking
For
it
way back on the day.
way
Yeah. Mhm.
back, where Kim and all her family had went on this luxury trip out in the tropics or something, and she's swimming in the water, and her earrings fall off in the water in the middle of the ocean, and she's out crying, talking about losing her diamond earrings. And her sister Chloe, who is always to me the more down to earth one, but she says, Kim, it is literally people out here in the world starving and dying, and you're sitting here getting emotional and crying about some fucking diamond earrings.
Yeah.
So the way you brought that analogy was, wow, that is ridiculous. We understand what Chloe was
Yeah.
saying.
Right.
But there is a lot of people who are in that scenario where they are in that ocean looking for their diamonds, and because of their environment and their context to the world, that is
Mhm.
a real life concern to them. Like it's a relatable feeling. And if you take that analogy and put it on other stuff, sweetie, sometimes you are the Kim K in your life. You are the Kim K in the situation where you're not thinking about nobody else. And while the physical emotion of you being sad or hurt about you losing, you talked about that little bit of power you losing.
Yeah.
You're losing that little bit of power, but in the context of the real world and other people experience, you're ridiculous. And I don't
You're
think we see that.
Yeah, because people are dying. Like we talk about DEI because we want more such and such in a space, but I'm just like, no, I do this work because there are literally people who are dying. Like people are starving, people are getting killed on the street. Like I can put my stuff to the side a little bit in order to think about the bigger picture. So yeah, I love it. I know people are like always laugh at me or like, I didn't come here to talk about Kim K, but I'm just like, but sometimes we her, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes we definitely her.
when we think about our context around HIV, you come from a time like me where being introduced to HIV was Magic Johnson.
Mhm.
Or prior to Magic Johnson, it was this kind of curse. And I say curse not because I think it's a curse, but because when I was a kid, that is how they sold it to me as a little Black boy. They said that if you keep acting like a faggot, if you keep
Mhm.
acting like a girl, if you keep doing this stuff, you're gonna end up with that.
Yeah,
Put
yeah.
that on me. This is what they said, and it was almost like they were trying to speak in tongues over me, like speaking these curses over me, and da 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 da. And they were using it as a fear tactic and as a curse. That's how I thought about it. And so and so that gives a certain level of stigma to me as a little kid when it comes to the ideas of HIV. And
Yeah.
so it is something that I had to learn. It's something I had Southern, uneducated, cisgender church folks uh, talking to me about gay shit and how this is God's punishment to you. This is da 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 da. Da. And so you talk about checking your own stuff when you were coming in contact with these high schoolers, well, not necessarily, I don't know if you said it was high schoolers, but with these
Clients, yeah. Yeah, I
clients
was in high school. Yeah.
who had either just been diagnosed and you had to really check your own shit. So can you talk about that experience a little bit deeply?
Yeah, absolutely. So same. That's how it, and I'm glad you said it like that. It was sold to me like that too. I remember the day that Magic Johnson popped up on BET special news. And the video soul stopped and BET it popped up and they talked about him having HIV. And what I remember are my parents' reactions. And it was, oh my God, all of a sudden he was gonna die. I didn't know anything about HIV up until that point. And I think I was maybe 10 at the time. I don't remember anything up until that point. In my family, I had a cousin that used to come. We had family reunions every year, and this person would constantly come. I would see them, and over time, I saw that he would get thinner and starting to get sick. And then one year, he just wasn't there, and so I asked my aunt, and I said, "Hey, you remember that kid with the glasses? Like, whatever happened to him? I haven't seen him." And I remember she told me she was just like, "Oh, such and such. He was an F word. He died of AIDS." And so those were kind of the only two things that I remember in my childhood about HIV was that people get it and it's not something you want and you die. And so that was something that I really had to adjust to coming to DC because like I said before, those were my first community folk. Like if I wanted to be a part of the queer community, especially being Black, a lot of our programs and funding came from folks who had funding around HIV, right? So Whitman Walker Health had the lesbian support group. That was something that I engaged in a lot. I ended up working at Whitman Walker eventually because that was kind of like my home in terms of like how I not only got care, but who I met, the people that I met. And so when I worked in a high school, a lot of the kids that I came in contact with, they had HIV. And so I had to work out my shit really quickly because some of these kids wanted to hug me. Some of these kids wanted to be close to me. I was their social worker, right? I was somebody that they sought to for care and for conversation, for support, for therapy. And so me having to jump, like I can't do that around kids pick up everything, right? It's spiritual, right? It's intuitive. Like I know who's safe and who's not safe to me. So there was a lot of there was a lot of information seeking that I had to do around what does it mean to work with folks around HIV? Working in households with HIV clients where they're talking about, yeah, my parents don't even let me eat off of our porcelain dishes, but they literally give me paper plates because they know that they think that I'm going to give it to them, right? So having to navigate really complicated situations. I had one of my teenage clients had gotten somebody pregnant. I had to go figure out, is it legal for me to tell this person? How is this girl going to know? How do we protect the family? Like going through some of these really nuanced things that you just don't think about and just also is not taught in social work school. Let me say, we do a horrible, horrible job of educating folks around HIV. And so thank goodness I'm at least an compassionate, empathic person where I'm like, I want to learn better. I can't imagine having somebody sit in front of another kid and then a kid tells somebody they have HIV and they're like, oh, well, let me put my gloves on, or I can imagine that probably happens to a lot of people with a lot of caregivers. So I think we need to do better on that end. But I will say for me, like just being in community has really helped. I think that also is why I, wanted to be a part of the board of the National AIDS Memorial, of just wanting to give back in a particular way. I think for me also in my personal life, I've, as a person who is non-binary and partners with, I'm 42, so it don't matter I'm putting my mouth on anything. So it doesn't matter who I partner with, but I also know that me partnering with everybody means there are ways that I need to protect myself. So, I'm a person that talks about being on PrEP very openly, and the importance of being on PrEP when you're partnering with people. So I feel like a part of my giving back to my cousin, to those students, to my community, is just how do I not only take care of myself, but how do I continue to educate and be a presence for other people where they might not see themselves. So yeah, that it was something that was a lived experience. It was not taught to me at all. I think there was a little sliver of talking about HIV in my program, but again, it was only like either you stay away from them or you wear condoms. That was it. Like even pepper prep, those conversations weren't happening back then. So
I remember my own check myself moment. So because I grew up as a queer person, Black queer boy child in the middle of 80s, I'm 43. So in the middle of the 80s, and I came out early. It wasn't like I was like grown when I came out. When I came out, it was fucking 94, right there, right at the tail end of the AIDS epidemic. In that time.
yes, yeah.
Because it started shifted, like the medication started to shift in like 95, 96. And I literally was watching people pass away. That was my friends and people. This was the time when, of course, like you were talking about, funding was kind of coming up, and people were literally, you could not go to a gay club without it being bowls of condoms and posters on the board. It was like we were inundated like hammers about HIV.
Yeah.
And so, and culturally, I had to have these conversations with aunts and uncles and these kind of educating conversations. So I would learn from the community, and then I would bring it back. So it was a process of time where I was like, oh, I know everything I need to know about HIV. I know you can't get it from kissing. I know you can't get it from drinking on a cup. I knew all the shit that there was almost like a self-righteousness when it came to straight people. I was like, I know way more than your motherfucking ass, and you don't know about it, and da 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 da. So there was a comfort level of talking about it, and in community, there was like a layman kind of jokey, and this may not be everybody, but this was my experience. People in my life, we would joke about it because
Yeah.
we knew we were close to people, and even people who were positive, like because we were close, no matter if you were positive or not, you knew I'm not judging you about this shit. You are in my house. I know that I'm doing risky shit too. So I'm not judging you. So even them, they would be joking and there would be like this kind of, I don't know, like this. I don't know. It's kind of like it
It's
was just
almost the removal, like, because we know it's the removal of fear and the removal of shame,
yeah,
right? Like we can settle into this in a different way as opposed to talking about it as a fear-based thing, it seems like.
yeah. And so
Yeah.
my gay son, I remember like 2010, my gay son came on my YouTube channel, and that jokey culture came out on a video with us together. And
Mm.
so we were making these HIV jokes towards each other and being recorded doing it. Now, in our friendship, we're joking about it. And I know he's not offended. He knows I'm not offended. And we're it's just what it is. And so in that moment, it felt like a cultural thing because it's not just us. I've heard other people doing this in our
Right.
community, making jokes. And so in my brain, the logic was, if we don't have a problem with it, nobody else should have a problem with it. And so
Right.
I posted the video. It's still up now. And in the comments, certain people who I knew were positive was like, y'all making these jokes. I didn't find this to be funny. This feels kind of shady. And da 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 da. I got so
Mm-hmm.
defensive. And
Mm-hmm.
the fuck are you talking about? I'm queer. I know all the things I need to know about HIV. How dare you think that I'm making fun of you and you know me? How you gonna come in my da 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 da? You know that this is the cultural thing. Like I was so defensive and just all like, rah, 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 rah. And it took me probably like a week of going back and forth in the comments where my brain had to say, bitch, you kind of wrong. Hey, I know your initial reaction because it might have been like some shame. It might have been like some, oh, these stupid dumb cis people that I've been judging this whole time. I am now turning into
Right.
but
Yeah.
and I'm not being sensitive about where somebody who might be watching this video is with that. Even if this person is comfortable with a joke and that's their culture, this person could not, they could have got diagnosed yesterday and this wasn't fucking funny. You get what I'm
Right.
saying?
Right.
And I
Right.
had to really check my own shit in regards to it and really understand that even in the process of you knowing and being educated about it, you still can make some mistakes and don't get too comfortable because this is a sensitive topic that even if you are not impacted by it, you have to be conscious of how people are reading you. And that was a moment for me where I had to like check my own shit.
Yes. I have a like a nuanced conversation about that, about language when I do like my trainings. Like there's just some words I don't say. Even though I'm queer, like I'm not saying the F word because from what I hear of certain people who are in community with me who use that word, they don't want some people using it. Cool, I'll let it go. Like I think it goes back to the nuance of what we're saying. I'm just like, there's Black queer people, right? But there's also subgroups of folks to where people have their own language and their own experiences and their own dress and how they show up. And those things should be protected and used by the people who are in those communities and who are, who are allyship to them, right? But I feel like sometimes we feel like just because I'm in the room, then I should be saying X, Y, and Z. Like, no, I want to respect that. If that's your word y'all want to say, I'm not going to say it because I also don't want to say it somewhere and a white person hears me say it and they feel like they can say it, right? Or a cis person hears me say it and they feel like they can say it. So I'm also just very careful about who I'm around because language isn't for everybody and it's coded for a reason, right? Like there's a reason why we don't tell everybody everything, or there's a reason why we don't always put certain types of like revolutionary or more so like grassroots movement language out in the forefront. Everybody don't need to know everything that you need to know. So yeah, I hear that.
Tell me what is bringing you euphoria this week.
Oh, I I work, first of all, I am always a fan of your outfits. And look, first of all, this scene. Okay, look at it. This scene is amazing. So I just want to say that, first of all. I love nice things. And I like exquisite and I was a part of the National Queer and Trans Therapists of Color Network Advisory Board, and we had this theme of like exquisite care. So I like nice glasses and jewelry. And so this weekend at our conference, we had a week-long conference, and because I'm the ED, I have to dress up, and every day like I wore like a very tailored suit. I, had something that was just like very masculine and affirmed that. And so we actually had our minority fellowship program. They had their 50th gala, and I wore a dress for the first time before Zay. Then Zay's 6 right now. So I wore this long, like blue flowy dress that I can't remember the last time I had one. And this really nice, like Alex Batar purse. I'll put pictures. It's beautiful, but I like investing in nice things, and that's what affirms my gender. Like, it's not even about like how masculine I am, how feminine I am, but I like nice cloths. I like a good leather purse. Give me some diamond earrings. Like, I showed out this week every single day. I will say that was affirming. And I think what affirmed me the most was like, I had on a suit that morning, but I came into that gala and people were like, who is that? That is what, and I'm a Taurus. So, like, that's what I like. That's what I like. So,
Yeah,
yes,
a girl after my own heart.
yes, I love it. Yes. Oh, hold on. I'm gonna show you the purse.
Okay. Yes. Oh, that is gorgeous.
I just walked around looking like this. I'm like, look at my purse. I just like nice things.
I
And that
love. Wait.
oh,
I love that you brought that out because what I love about Alexis Batar, if you look at her stuff, so this is some earrings. I don't have the bag.
is that the green one? The one that is like green or it's like lumen
No, it's that clear that that's what like just
the
like that.
body.
That
Mm-hmm.
gaudy clear and gold. I have a necklace that is somewhere in the back room, but these are the earrings. It's just like this where I love how they do that kind of gold that goes into the clear, just like
Just like the bag.
that
Mm-hmm.
bag is so dope. I am that
Just like that.
jealous.
Oh my gosh. I don't
Love
even want I just like hold it like this because I don't even it's
I don't even want to mess it up.
I don't even want to mess it up. And I be just, I have a child. So my kid was already like, what's that? And I was like, oh, no. Stay away from that. But yes, that is euphoric to me of just, I can put on anything and look good.
Amen.
That made me feel good this week.
I love
Yes.
that. I
Yes.
was talking to my friend about some of that. I don't say guilt. That's not the word. I don't know what it is. That's what's first coming to mind. So let's just say guilt. Um, I like nice shit. Like I like nice shit. And so there is like some kind of anti-capitalist kind of guilt that kind of comes up in me sometimes. But I also is like, I work really hard for shit. And now you have children. I don't have children. So if I want to spend my money on this nice thing, I'm gonna spend it. Now, does it feel the feed the beast of maybe like luxury fashion or da 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 da? But I can do that at a fucking thrift store. I shop at luxury places. I shop at thrift stores. I literally go to vintage shops where I'm not paying full price. And I'm the type of person, if I like something, if I can find it on consignment, I'm gonna buy it on consignment. I'm always gonna try to save a coin, but there are certain things that the fabric is super nice and you're not gonna find it at Shein. No, I got some Shein too, so it's not me.
Hey, you're right. Both hands. Right.
Right, both and but I like nice shit, and so I spend my money on shit that I think is fucking nice that makes me feel good. It has to make me feel good. I'm not just going buying something just because it's
Right.
a luxury brand. But if I like this thing and it just so happened to be a luxury brand, I'm gonna try to look for it for a cheaper price, or
Mhm.
I'm gonna splurge on it because I fucking love this fucking thing. And so, do you navigate those kind of minds?
Yes, same thing. I'm looking at, and even with this purse, it took me a while. Right where I was just like, all right, let me negotiate with myself. Like, do I need this? But it was my like, I got a new job. Congratulations. But it's not even just about clothes. Like my wallpaper, how I
Beautiful.
close my home, like my couches, like everything. It takes me a while to make those big expensive purchases, but also because I have a kid, some of it is also investment where it's just like this leather jacket. If I buy a real leather jacket, like this is going to last when Zay wants to wear it. When I buy a purse, like this is going to last for whoever else wants it behind me. So yeah, I go through the thrift store, find it in other places. But sometimes when I find something I want it, I just go ahead and buy it.
Yeah. And I learned that like about jeans too. Like they don't make jeans like they used to do. And so sometimes
Right.
when you invest in the jeans, the fit and the
Yeah.
feel of it, I would buy the cheap jeans and the inside of my thighs would be ate up.
Right.
In
Every year.
Yeah, at the end of the year. So I might as well should have went him about this because when I go to the thrift store and get those Levi's from the fucking 80s or the 90s that had that they don't tear up like that. They really last. But for some reason, because of the quality going down in how they're making clothes nowadays, it just I rather invest in a pair of jeans that really is gonna last me as opposed to buying a cheap pair that I'm gonna have to replace anyway when the fucking insides get ate out.
Exactly. And that's the same conversation folks are having about Doc Martens, right? Where it's just like there's a certain time period where Doc Martens were made and it went made actually overseas in that factory with real leather. Very different from the ones you get now that, I had just bought some a couple years ago and they're starting to tear in the back. So yeah, the quality. Yeah, it's quality. Quality is definitely hurting us. But yeah, I just put a little extra couple dollars because I don't want holes near my thighs.
What's bringing me euphoria this week is I am currently watching The Penguin on HBO. And
Okay.
so it is of course, another Batman themed
Ooh.
Batman themed series, and this
Okay.
series revolves around the Penguin. But
Okay.
it is like it is. I love the Penguin back in the day, like the more cartoon
Same.
with Michelle Pfeiffer and Danny DeVito. I love that, but this is a more like real life, real. It's not as cartoonish as not that that was a cartoon, but you get what I'm saying, like him having flippers and you get what I'm saying, that unrealistic kind of shit.
Yeah.
This is more based in reality, like the new upping, like the Joker, like the
Okay.
new Joker is more based in reality, but these same characters. And so the Penguin is they're telling you the story of how, there's this is what's been happening kind of lately, where they're telling the backstories of villains. And
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I'm with it. Okay.
kind of sympathize with them because now you know their whole story. And that's what happening with Penguin. Penguin, they're telling his story and it's so amazing. But what's been bringing me joy is there is this character called the Hangman. Now, it's a classic Batman character, but it's the female villain in the show. It's the female character. And there's an episode this week and last week and this week. There's an episode where it only focused on her. And you don't know her story until this episode. This is episode 4. And her story was so dope and how she got revenge. At the end, it was so good. That brought me joy. But this week, after that episode, she was fabulous. She running around killing people in a chartreuse silk satin silk gown. She wearing it out through a mansion, killing motherfuckers. So that was last week. This week, she's getting revenge on somebody that she found out last week betrayed her. So she went to the lover of the person to kill the lover, and it's another woman. And so when she's sitting, she literally comes in with the gun, like, I'm coming here to wear you out. But in the midst of the conversation, they have this woman to woman, because what you learn in this conversation is that I know you a fucking mob princess, the main girl that I'm talking about, the villain. You a mob princess that has been protected, but all these men threw you under the fucking bus, and now you out here wearing it out. They literally put you in an insane asylum. And so, even though you were protected in this mob boss situation, you still was oppressed by patriarchy.
Wrong too, right?
And here I am. I'm in this circle of whores. I'm the madam of all these hoes. And now you coming to kill me because I'm connected to the man that betrayed you. And what you're learning is that you've been betrayed by your whole family. And I have a family that you have always wanted. Because with these hoes, because we loyal to each other. I literally let you come up in this house. They could have killed you.
Yeah, right.
Figured out how to come. You think you came here like without nothing. I'm like, my people told you to come up. And I know you was already looking for me, but my family know that if I let you, I'm here to I know you're gonna kill me because I know you about that life. You get what I'm saying? I know you about that life.
Right. But I'm just letting you know beforehand.
I
What's
got you
happening.
together, but I know that it's gonna affect my girls, and these are my family. And I much rather you get me and I negotiate with you. Just don't touch my babies.
Yeah.
And that moment of realizing this bitch got a family that I want. Made
Yeah.
her tell her, yo, you know, I ain't even gonna kill you.
Okay.
And you
Just
think
like
you,
that, right?
yeah, she was like, yo, you in the same shit that I'm in. We both have been betrayed by men because the man I'm coming to get you, he's betrayed you. That's how I know you here. And so if I do you, I'm just another pawn in these niggas' scheme.
Because
And
they gonna find somebody else, right? Yes.
like, so nah, she's like, nah. So at the end of this episode, she was like, you know, listen, we women in this world, and regardless of where we came from, we still dealing with this shit. And I'm trying to change the power dynamic. So boom, I'm gonna let you ride. We'll talk again. I'm gonna go do my thing. And it was such a euphoric moment for me.
Oh my God. What? You said HBO? Now I have to get
HBO.
this is something
HBO.
I would watch. Absolutely. Just, if we
Penguin and
remove the distractions, we can sit and actually be like, we're already here, right? Like, what else can we do besides feed into whatever play they got? Yes, absolutely.
it was
Wow.
such a powerful moment. The writing is so good. The main
Okay.
character who's playing Colin Farrell is the main character who playing Penguin is Colin Farrell.
And I'm hearing he's awesome. Like, you don't even realize
Um,
it's like I'm hearing I'm hearing it's dope. Okay.
Mind blowing awesome. He need the fucking Emmy. Not all, but everybody. The acting is so good. The little black boy, because his right hand man is a little black boy that stutters. For
Okay.
that Penguin kind of spared his life because he was like, "Oh, you kind of got a disability like me," because Penguin got a disability, and
Okay. Yeah,
that's why they
right.
call him the Penguin. And
Right.
so he's like, "Oh, I need you on my side," and so they kind of ride or die. And it's kind of dope. It's everybody is just fucking good. It's such a good
On my
series.
list.
I love it. So that's what's been bringing me euphoria this week.
Yeah, I got a new show now. Thank you.
Check it out.
Because I like that the old Penguin. That is one of my
I
favorite.
love it. One of my favorite movies. Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Renee, I want to thank you for coming on the show and sharing your brilliance. I love you. You are amazing. I just had to share you with the rest of my people. And yeah, thank you for the show.
Thank you so much. Like this, I'm a fan, but please let's stay in touch. This was awesome. Thank you so much for allowing me this space. Really.
And I one of my favorite pictures of the trend, which this is literally the first time that I met you.
Yeah.
I was hired as a photographer for the Trans March, and you were at that gala. And
Yeah.
I took that picture, and you were so fly. I was like, I'm gonna put the picture in the video right now. But yes,
Yeah.
it just was such an amazing time for me. One of my favorite pictures of the moment, just capturing what was going on at the event, and y'all were so fly. But yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you. All right.
All right, tell the people where they can find you, so I can put your links in the bottom.
I am on the internet. Dark Chocolate Noir is my Instagram. Also, if you want like less of me, more Dr. Thomas, Dr. Shanea Thomas is also my other Instagram. But yeah, if you Google me, I'm out there. Just find me. And if you're interested in being a part of accreditation, that's find me too, right? We can let's bring you in. But I love having my hands in different spaces. But anytime that I can be helpful in any way to anybody, especially you, Diamond, please let me know. I am here to be of service. So thank you.
All right, and I will put all the links in the bottom. Make sure y'all check her out, and thank y'all for watching. And I will see y'all next week.
All right. Bye.
The best way to support is to engage with the content. Like, comment, share, and subscribe. Another way to support, if you got a couple of dollars, become a patron. It's a monthly donation just to help content creators continue to do work that they do. So you're sacrificing a coffee or, just a small portion just to show your appreciation for the entertainment that we provide to you on a consistent basis. Thank you so much, and thank you for listening. Have a wonderful day.